Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Before we jump into the article, I'd just like to give a shout out to Virginia Roberts for setting up a GoFundMe account for Maria Farmer as Maria battles cancer. I know just about every single person listening to this podcast knows somebody that they care about or somebody that they love who has battled cancer, and just about all of us have witnessed the toll that it takes on not only the person who is waging the battle, but all of their loved ones and those who support them. As somebody who has went through this personally with the person I love the most, my amazing girlfriend Carrie, who was diagnosed with stage 2B breast cancer a couple of years ago, I understand what Maria is facing here, and I understand how much of a burden, not only mentally but financially, waging a war with cancer can be. So to see Virginia step up to the plate here and create a GoFundMe for Maria is very heartwarming, and it gives me faith in humanity, right? Especially to see all of the people who have rallied around Maria so far and have followed Virginia's lead and donated to Maria's GoFundMe account. Now, everybody who listens to the podcast knows that I'm not the kind of person that ever talks about, raising money really, or peddles any kind of donation programs or anything like that. That's not what I do here on the podcast. If people want to donate to the podcast, that's awesome, and I definitely appreciate every single person who does that. But that's not my goal with the podcast. It never has been. But what I will do today on this episode is ask you if you can give anything to Maria Farmer and to her GoFundMe. Every little bit helps. If you could, just a couple of bucks, whatever it may be. Or if you were thinking about donating to my podcast and supporting my podcast, I would ask you that you do not do that. And I would ask you to direct those funds to Maria's GoFundMe account. She's the one waging this battle against cancer. She's the one that's in the trenches. And she's the one that's going to need our support more than ever, as she begins her journey to crush this disease and kick its ass, which she's definitely going to do. She's going to need all the support that she can possibly get. So I would ask everybody, if you were planning on donating to my podcast or helping support the podcast for the next month or whatever, that you would just donate to her GoFundMe instead, because the battle that she's waging is a very tough battle, folks. I'll be real with you. All right. Getting that diagnosis, getting the cancer diagnosis and sitting in that room is one of the hardest things you can possibly ever imagine. I know from personal experience when Carrie and I got that phone call to go to the doctor's office and get the results, I knew right when we walked in that it wasn't going to be good. The nurse gave me that look, and I could see in her eyes that things were not going to be good. And to tell you guys the truth, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff with nowhere to go when we got that news. And we got home from the doctor's office, and we decided how we were going to tell people what was going on. And Carrie is one of those kind of people that everybody loves her. Everybody wants to be around her and hang out with her. She's just, such a very happy-go-lucky person, and the kind of person that brightens everybody's lives up. So when people heard about what was going on with Carrie, I was just blown away by how everybody rallied around her, and her friend set her up a GoFundMe. And folks, it helped us out a lot. It really helped us out a lot, because obviously with her being sick, she wasn't working some days. She was losing hours, and I was losing money because I was having to stay home with her. So having the generosity of our friends and the community and people around us step up to help us out, it lifted a great burden from not only my shoulders but hers. And I hope that we can help Maria in the same fashion. I hope that everybody can, if you can't donate, then please just share the GoFundMe link. And let's try and get Maria set up here. Let's try and get her comfortable financially, so that moving forward, all she has to focus on is her battle with this cancer, because that's a hard enough battle alone, folks. I can't even imagine the stress for Maria at this point, with everything going on with a pandemic, getting ready to start treatment, the whole nine. It's a daunting task, and it's a long road. But guess what? With all of your support and with all of the people who care about her rallying around her, it'll make it that much easier. So again, if you can donate, or if you were thinking about helping support the podcast, I would ask you, in lieu of that, please donate to Maria Farmer's GoFundMe and help her kick the living shit out of the dreaded, disgusting piece of crap disease called cancer. Maria will also be joining us later on tonight here on the podcast, and we'll be talking a little bit more about the situation that she went through on the Wexner's ranch and at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein's associates. So again, folks, I can't thank you enough for all of the support of the podcast, how amazing all of you are, all of you that have been around from the beginning. I mean, I could literally name 15, 20 people who have been around since the very first podcast almost. I mean, it's funny too. I go back and I look, and the very first podcast was labeled Rico. I mean, come on. We've been on that trail forever here, and I don't know. I'm just thankful. I guess just thankful for how amazing all of you listeners are. And I think that it's pretty amazing to see how everybody has started to rally around Maria as she's come out. So I hope that if you can, you'll be able to donate a little bit. And if not, don't feel bad about it. Look, I get it. It's a tough time for everybody. I mean, it's hard times all around. It's a rough situation. But if you can't donate, then please just share it on your social media and get the word out that this amazing lady is engaged in a serious battle against a serious foe. And that foe is a foe that all of us at one point in time, in one aspect of our lives or another, has come in contact with and has seen what it does and seen the devastation that it causes. So I hope that everybody is ready to step up and help Maria here, because she needs it, folks. She definitely needs it, and she needs our support. So again, big shout outs to Virginia Roberts for getting this campaign moving, for initiating it, and for kicking it into high gear. The link for that GoFundMe account will certainly be within the description box. And again, folks, thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening. It's humbling. It's definitely humbling. So I don't really like to reach out and ask you guys for much. You know, I'm not that kind of person, as you all know. Just like during this whole entire pandemic thing, you know, especially during this whole entire pandemic, it's tough, right? But if you can and it's within your ability, please, please, please help Maria kick the shit out of cancer. All right, so on to our article. Our article today is from the Florida Bulldog, and it has to do with the decision of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in regards to the Jeffrey Epstein situation in Florida. Now, we know that the appeals court heard the case, but it was only 3 members of the court. We had a 90-year-old man, a Harvard graduate, and we had one woman on the panel. And the woman, Judge Hull, gave a scathing dissent of the decision rendered by the other 2 judges on the panel. And with that scathing dissent, really opened the door for the lawyers to appeal further up the line and get the whole entire 11th Circuit Court and panel to hear the case, as opposed to just the 3. So we're going to get into this article here from the Florida Bulldog and get another perspective on it and see what the author, Noreen Marcus, has to say about it. Jeffrey Epstein didn't inhabit the sordid world of sex trafficking all by himself. That is the understatement of the year. He certainly did not. We know that it was a whole organization of his friends involved, and helping things move along and make sure that the organization ran like a well-oiled machine. He had plenty of company on his private jet called the Lolita Express at his retreat in the U.S. Virgin Islands, his New Mexico ranch, and his glitzy homes in Manhattan and Palm Beach. The teenage girls he lured with cash said they were forced to sexually service Epstein and his friends. And, well, we know that from numerous accounts, right? It's not like people are just pulling this out of thin air. It's not like people are just saying, oh, well, we think that Jeffrey Epstein was up to this. No, that's not the case, okay? None of this was pulled out of thin air. None of this is made up. This is all stuff that has been documented time and time again. Jeffrey Epstein was a sick, depraved, disgusting son of a bitch. Before his legal troubles began in 2006, Epstein socialized with, among others, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Britain's Prince Andrew, and Alan "I kept my underpants on" Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor and celebrity advocate who later defended President Trump in his impeachment trial. None of them has been charged in connection with Epstein. Well, no, that's true. None of them has been charged in connection of Epstein, but let's take a look. Of the four mentioned, 2 of those 4 are accused by Virginia Roberts of not only being enablers, but being involved with the actual trafficking of women. Her specifically. So, while Andrew and I kept my underpants on Dershowitz might not have been charged, there is a heavy, disgusting cloud hanging over the both of them. And I don't think that it's right or fair for outlets, legacy media, or otherwise to pussyfoot around that and to tiptoe around that. Look, the fact of the matter is this. These people are credibly accused. Point blank, period. They need to answer for it. While awaiting trial in August of 2019, the corrupt financier, pedophile, was found hanging in his New York jail cell, dead of an apparent suicide. Epstein's death ended a second criminal prosecution. Victims are looking at his $600 million estate for compensation. Yeah, as they should be. That compensation should have already been doled out. Okay? I'm not going to rehash my feelings about all of that again. You've heard it a million times at this point on the podcast. But come on. Let's get the ball rolling. Indike and Khan need a slap in the mouth by the judge, and we need to get this moving in the proper fashion. These girls need to have their compensation. These girls need to be able to get on with the rest of their lives. But questions about Epstein's sex ring survive him. This month, a high-ranking federal judge raised these questions by way of an expansive dissenting opinion that sheds new light on how a 2007 deal went down. The deal that has bedeviled all the players in the Epstein saga ever since. And this is what I said, remember folks, when this opinion first came out and there was a lot of doom and gloom surrounding it, I tried to inject a little bit of an upside. And that upside was how vicious the dissent was by Judge Hall. Whenever you have one dissenting judge that is that adamant about things going in the other direction, you can almost guarantee yourselves a full look by the whole entire panel. And that's what we're going to see here, and that's why we're reading this article again. Not that we didn't read this article yet, but this story again, I should say. We like to add context here. You know that. I don't like to just do one article and then forget about it and never go back to it. Whenever we can add some more context and some more information to what the topic at hand is, we're definitely going to dive into that. And even if it's a bit repetitive, we're going to keep hammering away at it, because every single one of these articles we read, we get a few chunks of new information, right? So with the dissenting opinion of Judge Hull, I was totally convinced that we'd be at a point where the whole entire panel would be convened, and I think that's what we're going to see as we move forward here. Sex ring players. Who joined Epstein in sexually exploiting the girls? Who works relentlessly to protect these shadowy figures? These are all questions we've asked on the podcast from day one. These are all legitimate questions. These aren't conspiracy theory questions. These aren't questions of somebody who's just trying to trip somebody up. These are legitimate questions, okay? Who works relentlessly to protect these shadowy figures, and who was involved? That's too much to ask. Those are high-charged political dynamite questions. Come on. Those are questions that need to be asked, need to be answered. The answers remain elusive 13 years after the Miami U.S. Attorney's Office entered into a bizarre pact that allowed an unknown number of what is called potential co-conspirators to sleep well at night. Meanwhile, they might have let all of these co-conspirators sleep well at night, but the survivors who have been being abused by Epstein and his associates and the legacy media for years and years and years, well, I don't think they were sleeping well at night, and I still don't think they are. They need some closure here, folks. They need these people to go to prison. And I don't care if the law gives them these loopholes. Then the law needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed right away, because there's no way on any planet, in any form of reality, that these sick bastards should be sleeping well at night while the survivors are still scratching and clawing for justice decades later. I have never heard of such a deal in which unnamed co-conspirators were given blanket immunity for unnamed crimes. Attorney Jack Scarola, who represents several of Epstein's survivors, has said. He called the open-ended immunity clause an extraordinary provision written for inexplicable reasons. In 2017, Scarola listed President Trump as a potential witness in the survivors' civil lawsuit against Epstein. And look, I know a lot of people don't want to hear it. I know a lot of people are still playing their tribalistic games, still playing their silly, nonsensical political games, but the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. They were buddies. It's a fact. You can't even dispute it, okay? Now, that does not mean that Donald Trump was engaging in abusing these girls with Jeffrey Epstein. There's no accusations such as that, okay? Just like with Bill Clinton. I know that people on the other side of the aisle want Bill Clinton to be a big part of this. I know that they want to say right away, oh, Bill Clinton was involved in abusing these kids as well. But we don't have that information yet. I'm not willing to do that on the podcast, make that leap until we have that information. Now, what I will say is this. They are definitely enablers. They are definitely enablers, and they should be called as witnesses, okay? Because we need to know what they saw. We need to know what they were involved in when they were hanging out with Epstein. That's what happens in a case like this. And that's why RICO is so important. If they slap a RICO charge onto these people, then nobody can get out from under it. I don't care if it's Trump, Clinton, or Andrew. Once those RICO charges start coming fast and furious, we will get to the bottom of this. But the only way that's ever going to happen is if the prosecution has the fortitude to go after these people the way that they should. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 state prostitution charges and served 13 months in the Palm Beach County lockup, almost all of it on work release. He enjoyed a decade of freedom before his 2019 arrest in New York for sex trafficking. And while he was enjoying that freedom, he was still engaging in the same behavior, still having young girls flown around with him, still doing Lord knows whatever to these poor girls. And all because the prosecution was too inept to really slap him with the charges he deserved. The prosecution was too corrupt to slap him with the charges that he deserved. And the question remains, who protected him and why? A year after the Miami Herald stoked public outrage over Epstein's lenient treatment with a powerful series of stories in November 2018, Labor Secretary Alex Acosta was forced out of Trump's cabinet. Acosta had signed off on the infamous 2007 deal when he was U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. And again, I have to go back to this. Kudos to the Miami Herald for sinking their teeth into this story, right? But what took them so long? Why did they have to wait until 2018? What happened in the years leading up to this that made Julie Brown go after the case? I think it was tribalism. I think it all had to do with Trump. It all had to do with the fact that Acosta, who was involved in the Epstein deal, who should have never been the labor secretary in the first place, but since Acosta was involved and he was a Trump nominee and a Trump holding a cabinet in Trump's administration, the Miami Herald went hard in the paint. My question is, why didn't they go hard in the paint in the years leading up to it? Why haven't they been going hard in the paint for the decade leading up to this? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't care what the motivation was when things started. All I care about is that Jeffrey Epstein ended up arrested and this story ended up back in the public eye. So kudos to the Miami Herald for that. But don't act like it all has to do with you were just so outraged about what happened to the survivors. Just be honest. Just be honest. You were looking to take down the president, to slap Trump as hard as you could, and your vehicle, the Miami Herald's vehicle, was Jeffrey Epstein. They thought that they could connect all of the dots here and really lay this in Trump's lap. And I'll tell you what, I don't care about any of that. That's fine with me. If they have the evidence, Acosta should have never, ever been labor secretary in the first place. The point I'm making is, would the Miami Herald have went after this case as hard as they did if there was not a Trump angle involved? And I know that's a hard question, and a lot of people aren't Trump supporters, and to be honest with you, I'm very neutral on the man myself. But that doesn't mean I can't be fair when I'm covering this, and I can't keep my biases out of things. Because when you look at it, it just smacks of another attempt to go after Trump. And what really makes me mad is, once Acosta was gone, well, where did all the interest go from all of the legacy media? You didn't see it anymore. You didn't see the go hard in the paint that they were using prior to Acosta stepping down. And guess what? They should have had the same fervor after Acosta stepped down. They should have went after this case as hard as they did previously to Acosta stepping down. And all you have to do is put the pieces together, connect the dots here, folks, and you see what occurred at the Miami Herald. And then you hear about how Julie Brown treated Maria Farmer, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Again, mad props to the Miami Herald for going after the story. The original motivation really doesn't matter as long as you pursue the truth, right? And that's what they did, and they uncovered some very important things, and they were able to really put this story back in the spotlight. But that doesn't mean I can't question their original motivations, right? And that doesn't mean that they're going to gaslight me and tell me, oh, well, this has always been about the survivors, when it wasn't, okay? And that it's obvious, the Miami Herald's angle here, okay? It's very obvious what they were up to. A ruling and a dissent. On April 14th, the Federal Appeals Court in Atlanta ruled that Epstein survivors cannot seek justice under the U.S. Crime Victims' Rights Act because basically Acosta decided not to file an indictment against Epstein, which is trash, just another loophole in the law, garbage ass loophole in the law, and Acosta was a terrible, terrible attorney general, a terrible state general, a terrible state attorney, and just a terrible human being for being involved in this. He had no courage. He had no backbone. He should have told them to get screwed, that he was going to bring Jeffrey Epstein to the very limit of federal power. But he was told hands off, that Epstein was involved with intelligence, whatever that means. So Acosta's choice cheated the survivors 2 times. First, by failing to punish their abuser, and then by denying them a legal remedy. The court didn't speak unanimously, however. Judge Frank Mays Hull issued an indignant 60-page dissent that includes new details about how the notorious deal came together. It shows that prosecutors worked closely with Epstein's defense team to shut the survivors out of the bargaining process. That clearly violated the law, Hull wrote in her dissent that begins on page 60 at this link. And remember, folks, every single article is sourced in the description box. I think there was a little bit of confusion with some people about that. Every single article is sourced in the description box. And at the beginning of the podcast, we talk about who the host is, who the author is, and who the outlet is. So just let's squash that non-sourcing BS right here and right now, okay? There we go. That's squashed. Now, when you click on the link in the description box and go to the article here, you'll be able to click the hyperlink that will take you to the 60-page dissent. A 60-page dissent, folks. That's crazy. The CVRA is not as impotent as the majority now rewrites it to be, she declared in her dissent. Encouraged by this, the survivors' lawyers are asking the full U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit to review the 2-1 panel decision. I told you that from the beginning, remember. I told you that there's zero chance that these three knuckleheads are going to be the last word here, and this case is way too politically charged for that to occur. The whole entire 11th Court of Appeals is going to see this, and it's going to be bad news for the government. I'm telling you right now. Hull's dissent says former Assistant U.S. Attorney Anne-Marie Villafana, the lead Miami prosecutor in dealing with Epstein's defense team, helped keep his survivors in the dark. Of course she did. We know about her. We know she's reprehensible. We know that she isn't some sort of advocate for survivors, and we know the prosecution helped screw the survivors in this case. It's an absolute joke. Did prosecutors protect a sex ring? Villafana suggested strategies to conceal portions of the plea deal from the courts, the dissent says. The agreement even states that it will not be made part of any public record. The dissent also shows that Villafana strove to protect the identity of the invisible potential co-conspirators the deal shielded from prosecution. So not only did she help write it, she helped to make sure that it was invisible. Okay, the co-conspirators were invisible in this case, that they had nobody had any idea who they were. And this is one of the prosecutors. This is one of the people who is supposed to protect the survivors. Anne-Marie Villafana, you should be ashamed of yourself. A week before it was signed in September 2007, Villafana sent what appears to be a smoking gun to an Epstein defense lawyer. I would prefer not to highlight for the trial judge all of the crimes and all the other persons that we could charge, Hull quoted her as saying in an email. The deal not only provided cover for the unindicted, it suspended a South Florida grand jury proceeding that could have outed them. All pending federal grand jury subpoenas will be held in abeyance unless and until the defendant violates any term of this agreement, it says. The subpoena list has never surfaced publicly. Well, that's not a shock. They want to keep everything in the dark, right? They want to make sure that we don't know anything as the public. They want to make sure you know nothing. That way they can continue to gaslight you. Thankfully, Judge Hull is really lighting them on fire with this dissent and letting Villafana know that she is on the clock. Villafana left the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2019 and now works for the Department of Health and Human Services in Phoenix, Arizona. She did not respond to an emailed question from Florida Bulldog. Of course she does. A bureaucrat moving to another bureaucracy. Does that shock anybody? The Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility is investigating Acosta, Villafana, and others who worked on the 2007 deal. By leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office when she did, Villafana avoided the possibility of getting fired. Yeah, and it was just a coincidence that she left, right? It had nothing to do with the fact that she might get shit-canned over all of this. These people are gross. You want to talk about swamp creatures? These are swamp creatures. These are people that have been there forever causing all kinds of havoc. Hull, a Clinton appointee to the 11th Circuit, dissented in the case of N.R.E. Courtney Wild. She was outvoted by Judge Kevin Newsom, a Trump appointee, and the author of the majority opinion, and Judge Gerald Barr Toflet, a Gerald Ford appointee who holds the record for tenure on federal appeals court. Let that sink in, folks. A Gerald Ford appointee is adjudicating a Me Too kind of case in the year 2020. When this guy was younger, he was probably beating his wife with a switch, and this guy's going to be an arbiter of truth in a case like this? Come on, we can do better, America. Court says only Congress can fix this. Well, I agree that Congress can fix this. And this is something we need to work towards. We need to get, I don't know how to do it, honestly. I'm not an advocate, right? I am not an advocate. I've said that a million times. I'm a news commentator and an independent content creator. But what I do know is this. The pressure needs to be put on Congress to rewrite these laws and to re-examine them, because the laws as they stand are straight trash. Newsom described Wild, the petitioner, as having been one of more than 30 underage girls who were victimized by notorious sex trafficker and child abuser Jeffrey Epstein. Yet, he rejected all of her request remedies and sent her away empty-handed. Now remember, Judge Newsom graduated from Harvard. How much money did Jeffrey Epstein donate to Harvard? How many ties did Jeffrey Epstein have to Harvard? And I'm not saying that Newsom is, involved in any of that. But there are no other judges that could have sat and heard this. Had to be somebody from Harvard that Jeffrey Epstein could have had ties to, or one of his many Harvard associates could have had ties to. Perception matters, folks. Wild has no rights under the Victims Protection Law because Acosta didn't initiate formal criminal proceedings against Epstein, Newsom reasoned. Acosta's office prepared but never filed a 53-page indictment. Yeah, of course they didn't. Just the preparation of the indictment alone should have been enough to sway Newsom. But instead, he's being obtuse. The CVRA was never triggered, the judge wrote. It's not the result we like, but it's the result we think the law requires. He suggested that Congress revise the law to cover situations like this. So, again, let me punt the ball. I'm the judge hearing this case, and in my courtroom, I am basically God, but it's Congress's fault. I'm going to punt. Meanwhile, they could have ruled in favor of Courtney Wild and then let the federal government appeal. But no, that once again, they have to rally around the troops. They have to rally around their buddies in the federal government and provide cover for obvious misdeeds by the prosecution. Good Lord, I really wish that this case would find its way to Emmett G. Sullivan's courtroom. Hull fired back, saying she sees no such limitation in the law. The majority's new blanket restriction eviscerates crime victims' CVRA rights and makes the Epstein case a poster child for an entirely different justice system for crime victims of wealthy defendants, she wrote. Well, what do you know? I guess Judge Hull believes in a two-tier justice system as well. Again, here it is for you, folks. Right in your face, the two-tier justice system. Isn't it grand? Indeed, Epstein fielded an expensive, star-studded lineup of lawyers to ensure that no charges would be filed against him. At various times over several months, Dershowitz, Roy Black, and at least 5 other lawyers, some from big-name firms like Kirkland and Ellis, New York, and Alston and Bird, Washington, D.C., put on defense shows for prosecutors, according to Hull. She noted how unusual it was to give Epstein's co-conspirators immunity without extracting a plea or cooperation from them. Hull said that over the years following the deal, these people never stepped forward in court to protect their interests. It would have meant revealing themselves. How is it possible? Can you imagine the government giving a deal like this to John Gotti and all of his associates? Imagine all the crooked noses got themselves a deal like this? Forget about it. There's no way. No way. The only people that get deals like this are people like Jeffrey Epstein, people protected by intelligence agencies, people with politicians in their pockets, people with judges in their pockets, regular old chumps like me and you and your Uncle Steve and your best friend Joan. Nah, we don't get these kind of deals, folks. The judge emphasized the need for prosecutors to explain their actions and provide answers. Mysteries still exist about how Epstein and his co-conspirators escaped federal prosecution for multiple sex trafficking crimes against over 30 minor girls in Florida, Hull wrote. Meanwhile, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Epstein probate case grinds on. Victims seeking money from the estate have been asked to sign releases to protect unidentified other individuals, Reuters news service reported. That request sounds familiar. So folks, here again, this article is once again basically giving it to you straight that with how much of a fiery dissent was put forward by Judge Hull, that there's no chance in hell that this does not get seen by the whole entire 11th Circuit. And that's going to happen, in my opinion. When that's going to happen, I have no idea. I really don't know much about how the court system moves as far as timelines in situations like this. That would be a question better asked to somebody like Bradley Edwards or one of the lawyers. I certainly don't have that information. But what I can tell you is this. from following things like this from afar, especially racketeering and RICO cases, I know for a fact that if this was anybody else, me, you, Weinstein, Bill Cosby, anybody else, they would have broke out the bazooka and smashed you over the head with a racketeering charge. But yet you have two judges on this appeal panel saying, yeah, we know shit was wrong. We know the government was in the wrong, but there's loopholes here, you can see, and the government navigated them. And meanwhile, what all of us are hearing is blah, 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 blah. You dudes are corrupt. The whole system is corrupt. The two-tier justice system is garbage, and we want it burned to the ground. That's basically what we're hearing. Okay? And enough is enough, right, folks, with the loopholes and with the rich and powerful navigating the legal system and shitting on the rest of us while they do it. That party's over. They're not going to get away with that no more. They're not going to be able to gaslight us using their henchmen in the legacy media anymore. They're not going to be able to do it. And the truth is coming out little by little, drop by drop. One ray of light will soon turn into a deluge of sunshine. And we all know that UV light is a fantastic disinfectant, folks. All right, so remember, later on today, I will have Maria Farmer on the program, and she will be discussing what she went through in her own words once again. And I will turn the mic over to her, and it'll be limited interruptions on my part, and we will let Maria tell her story. She's been censored for years, and she has been, edited for years. That will never occur on this podcast. Maria's story is hers to tell. It's not some editors to tell. It's not some bloggers to tell. It's nobody's to tell. It is her story to tell, and she will tell it in a manner that she sees proper. So that will be out tonight, I'd say by 7 or 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, right around then. So make sure you are on the lookout for that. All right, if you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. And you can also find me on that vile, disgusting swamp that we call Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, folks, I will see you later on, and when I come back, I will be joined by Maria Farmer.